don't know. I don't know if you were ready for that. I just pressed the button because we customarily spend a half hour saying the funniest shit that we will say all night.
That's true.
And then before I press the button, so I figured I should get to it.
Oh my
We
god.
can cut whatever we want. By we, I mean I.
But yeah, I was gonna say I don't do work. I was at this party tonight with normal humans, non-magical humans.
Ye old muggle.
Ye old muggles, who I have a strong fondness for. These are all people I like very, very much. And
Dig it.
what's funny is there's always this moment in the conversation where you're like, if you look at it magically, this solves a shit ton of your problems. But you realize that like there's a little throw your pearls before swine. There's a little like, am I going to actually help these people by saying it? So there's this dance you do where you're like, how can I make my point in a way that's going to be heard?
Yesterday I saw somebody who was she like did something, she dropped something or something like that, and she was like, stupid, stupid, stupid. And I was like, this is the worst spell you could possibly cast right now. This is the very worst thing you could do. She was like, is that a spell? And then I was like, I'm pouring drinks, right? I don't have time to deal with this. Like,
Yes.
just don't do that anymore, please.
That's a tough one too, because that shit gets in, that particular demon gets in there and will hang the fuck out. Like
the self-talk joint. Yeah, man. Bad news.
I still work. I don't know. I picked up a particularly nasty one that I'm aware of, right? And that I get rid of on a regular basis, but it's a recurring kind of thing. And I need to figure out when it hit me first. Do you know what I mean? So that I can kind of disentangle the initial emotional hook on this thing.
How would you go about doing that?
Journey for one, I think. So like, first off is honestly is data collection. When do I do this? What is the trigger that gets me doing this particular line? Because it's a very specific line of like phrasing, right? So it's like, okay, what is the trigger point? And then it's like, okay, can I go back to a point where I can feel when this got going? You know what I mean? Like you can feel that. And if you can, great. You can sort of work on healing that moment and doing some time magic and that stuff. If you can't, then I feel like it's one of those kind of go up the line ancestrally and be like, yo, ancestors, I would like to stop doing this. You know what I mean? Like, can you help me out? But yeah, I really should spend some time doing that. It's one of those things where like I change my circumstances so it doesn't happen as much these days.
Oh, so your trigger doesn't show up as much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's, I mean, any kind of magical problem that we can solve with mundane solutions, I feel like that's really the move. The heading to spellcraft first is not it, in my opinion. Like, it's almost like feng shui, can we blame the furniture? Can we just rearrange the room?
Well, and what now you got me thinking about ways to classify that, because I think there is a kind of what, for lack of a better term at the moment, I'm going to call mundane magic that gets massively overlooked in favor of the spellcraft, or even in favor of like meditation and stuff, where like, so one of the first big magical experiments I did on myself was, I think I picked this up from Crowley, but was like, what if you only drank black coffee for a year? Like, how does your life change if you never take cream or sugar in your coffee ever? And you had been someone who did. And so when people like, don't you take your coffee this way? You're like, not anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you do the full thing. What I learned is that like that kind of thing turned me into kind of an asshole.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm
so bitter.
I mostly drink black coffee now because I like it. It was the act of being like, I'm doing a magical experiment on myself, turned me into an asshole.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this community at large that like I really struggle with, that like makes me not really want to participate very much, and I end up not participating very much. There's the like kind of like douchey, like nose, look down your nose at, like gotta And listen, I like a nice $5 word, just like,
Sure.
like anybody, I sometimes will call myself erudite, like get the fuck out of
As you
here, right?
should. As you should.
But
Listen. I have a lot of graduate school debt.
sure, yeah,
I gotta give something for it.
right, totally, yeah. It's always it cracks me up every time you're like, listen, I don't want to be the this goes back to Beowulf guy, but
But it does, and I'm about to quote you some Beowulf.
right, exactly, yeah. Like I definitely cannot quote Beowulf, but yeah, that's that kind of like assholery. Is kind of common for around, I don't know, ceremonial magic or something like. And the sense, one of the things that I notice about magic is that once you realize that the world is made of magic, then you get an insight that is not common. It is uncommon to realize that the world is made of magic, and because you have that insight, then you're like cooler than everyone else is.
And you got to really watch the cooler than everyone else. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's.
Which is a problem because I am legitimately cooler than everyone else. What am I supposed to do?
To be fair, you're doubling down there, right? Like it's like you're already cooler than everybody else, and you know a magic secret. Like that's really hard to deal with.
Terrible.
But it's a really good trap, right? Because I think it does keep you from what you're talking about, very simple solutions that are inherently magical. So like, if you go for a 20-minute walk every day, if you decide I'm gonna start my day with a walk, I'm just going to get out in nature and do stuff. That is a profoundly magical act that will absolutely shift your consciousness over time. And what I think makes it that fucking dude, that fucking dude cracks me up. Got to get the light in your eyes.
No, he's into prayer these days. He's about that shit.
Is he on prayer?
Yeah.
Now? Okay, cool.
He's down with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen,
he won't tell you who he's praying to or what his practice looks like, but he does endorse prayer publicly these days.
Good for him, because the numbers on that are pretty straightforward. Like it's actually
it's like gratitude. It's like if you just do it, then like everything gets better after that.
80% of your problems probably take care of.
Right.
Yeah. But I think the difference with doing it magically versus just doing it is being aware, being wise, and being one of the wise in how you do it. So in other words, becoming aware of the connected webs you're touching as you do that, the relationship. So like what changed?
The prayer or the mundane magic? What are you talking
about?
The
mundane magic. Although I think prayer can also fall in that category, but like the mundane magic stuff. So like if you just give up your coffee because you're doing a magical experiment on yourself, the threads you're connecting with are other assholes who've just done magical. Like the story you've made is a story of assholes.
Sure. Okay.
But if you do it because you're like, I kind of want to get to know coffee for coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just want to get to know coffee for a little bit. And I want to have this entanglement with coffee. And I want to think about, where does coffee come from? What does it mean to have coffee this way? How does this change the way I have coffee? Like, Italians who go in and have like a double shot of espresso at the counter, talk to a guy, fight about who's paying, and get the fuck out, right? That's a different culture than I'm going to sit in a coffee shop and talk to people for 2 hours, which is equally valid. It's the one I like. It's actually a Turkish start. But you know what I mean? So like, if you learn more about the story through the process of the mundane rearrangement, that's where I feel like the magic has a way to take it to a little bit. You get more out of it rather than just light hits my eyes at a certain time of day, and therefore my hormones for the day are set in a certain context. And like that's over explaining that it's great to see sunlight, dude. Like it's fine. It's just nice to see sunlight.
Sure. Okay. All right. We can flex on him if we need to.
He's a big dude. I don't know if I want to be fighting Andrew Huberman. That dude's in pretty good shape.
You ever seen him without a shirt on? That dude is not playing games.
We have just learned a lot about me, but yes, I have seen Andrew Huberman without his shirt on. Maybe
I know, right? If you haven't seen it, the viewers at home, maybe you should.
It's worth your time. Boys, I'll tell you something else.
Worth noticing.
Say something else. People forget about this. He's built a good neck. Like, and coming from fighting and stuff.
Neck game strong.
Gotta have a good, strong neck game. If you don't, I don't want to see some pencil fucking neck on some dude with broad shoulders. No, thank you. It's like he knocked himself out by trying to turn and answer a question. What? Out like a light.
Right. Yeah. That Huberman, he knows a thing or two.
Got a
But
good thick neck, is all I'm saying.
yeah. Knows what to do with that neck. You know, appreciate that about him.
It's always good when I've been out at another event drinking before I come to this. We just roll right into it.
Yeah, man,
Oh
that's
my
what,
God.
that's what we're here to do.
So wait, but when did Huberman start getting on the prayer shit?
I noticed it. So it was like he had a cancellation campaign against him, and so the next time I heard from him, he was silent for a little bit, and then he went on Lex. And when he went on Lex, then I was listening to that, and he was talking about prayer and because he's got this new book, Protocols or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And he's like working on all these different protocols, and I think prayer is going to show up in the book or something like this. And so he was like talking about his thing that he'd be doing in the morning times and I don't know if he's worshiping the sun or whatever. I think that would be very reasonable. I don't think that
Totally
he
reasonable.
is quite that reasonable, but
but it is something that gives you life for free as an act of
literally,
grace. You know what I mean? Like
the idea of worshiping the sun like makes total sense. If all you do is worship the sun and the moon, like
it is the most logical choice, to be honest. And like
right.
I was just listening to Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's got a new book out about the serviceberry or whatever that I want to check out.
She's got a whole book on the serviceberry?
Yeah, she just put out a whole new book based on that, apparently. It was some NPR interview I heard while I was driving around.
NPR does love Robin Wall Kimmerer, and
they do.
I got to give it to them. They got it right that time.
Yeah, that's true. Also, what I will say is it's one of those cases where the NPR people are smart enough to just let her talk the whole time. Do you know what I mean?
Love that.
It's like,
love it.
Good. Just good. That's how it's going to work. But she was talking about gifting economies, and through that, and she's like, all gifting economies start with the sun. The sun is the source of all gifts, and you're like, if your entire practice was good morning, source of all gifts. I earned, I've worked, I've done stuff and everything else, but at the base, I did not earn my existence on this planet. It has been given to me by the sun. Start there. Do you know what I mean? That's a pretty great religion.
Yeah, and
you
the
don't
moon.
have to do much else. And the moon. I agree. Yeah, because the tides don't happen.
The moon also.
Yeah. Yeah, the ocean isn't the ocean. We don't get life at all without the moon. And
yeah, we live in the sublunar sphere, like all the other celestial influences have to go through the sphere of the moon in order to get to us, and the moon sort of distributes all the wealth, you know what I mean? And so like we appreciate the moon.
Gifts.
But yeah, if all you did was say what's up to the luminaries on a regular basis, like you would do very well for that. And that's like one of the things that I have like people, it's so funny because people think I'm so very joyful and they don't really realize how very bleak my outlook is much of the time. But one of the things that I say to people sometimes, and it like really freaks them out, is that none of us deserve anything. Like there is no deserving, and it's that very thing that you're talking about like I was given this life and I did not earn it, And so I don't deserve either the good or the bad things that happen. Like you get what you get and you do your best, hopefully.
Yeah. It's the Huberman thing, you were saying the protocols and stuff. I cannot remember if I thought this on my own or I read this someplace else, so apologies if this is somebody else's joke. But that eventually all practitioners of like ceremonial magic and everything else revert to Eastern Orthodoxy. That like it's like how everything evolves to crab. It's like every magic dude eventually grows a long beard and decides to join Mount Athos monastery and ends up just basically doing the Jesus prayer and seeing the sun every day. It's like it's just what happens,
Right.
But if you think about how Orthodoxy ended up being kind of the receptacle of a bunch of Hermeticism, and it goes back a long time, and you know what I mean? Like it is a very like thank you, sun, for existing kind of faith. But one of the things I was saying at this party with people, because they were trying to figure. I got talking with one dude who was trying to figure out where I sat religiously as opposed to magically. I was like, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I was explaining that, like, he's like, your parents are Christian. I was like, yeah, my parents are Christian ministers. And he's like, but you're not Christian. I was like, not in the way they would like me to be. You know, you know what I mean? Like
word. Let's come back to this story. I want to derail you for a second. One time, so my dad lives in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So I went to, he's been living in Taiwan a long time now, maybe 15 years or something like that. And so I went to visit him there as a graduation present when I graduated from college. He brought me out to Taiwan.
Nice.
And I was out there having a wild time, eating all the weirdest shit that I could possibly eat. And we were out here at this noodle spot, and we were with some Taiwanese people, and they were talking about my dad being Christian, and they were like, so you're a Christian too? And I was like, well, no. And they could not grasp that I did not have the same religion as my father did. They were just like, what do you mean? And I like tried to explain it, and they were like, what do you mean? Oh, it was because I ate some blood. Evidently, because I was trying to eat weird things, and the menu was in Chinese, and I couldn't read none of it. And so I was just like, all right, like, let me get one of these, and the tentacle with the suckers on it, let's throw that on there.
Let's try that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's talk about what it is after I've eaten it. And so then my man was like, oh yeah, that one was blood. And then my dad was like, oh, I definitely don't eat blood because I don't know, I guess it shows up in Leviticus or something like that. I don't know.
Oh yeah, there is some. Yeah, if you're taking a more sort of Jewish Judaizer kind of look at things, then yes, eating blood is one of the non-kosher things. Yeah.
Yeah, which I was not familiar with. That was not something that I was raised with. When I heard it was blood, I was like, word? I would have expected that to be more delicious than that was. Okay. But he was taking a hard line on the blood.
Disappointed by this blood.
I was just the mouthfeel was not what I thought it was tofu. I thought it was like a little gray tofu situation. And so the texture was not, and it was like a little sticky and not very delicious.
That's badly cooked blood. We got to get you a blood sausage sometime. Like, this blood sausage is way better than that.
Sure, yeah, I hook it up. I love eating weird shit, but anyway, yeah. So it blew everybody's mind. Everybody at the table was like, I don't understand how you can eat blood and you over some religious reason, and you can't, like, what is happening here? And I tried to tell him, and we just had to agree to disagree at the end of it.
That is one of my favorite things when you're traveling in a different country, because I think a lot of times as Americans, you forget, like, how hard some of these social lines are around the world. You know what I mean? In a way that, like,
because we don't got no traditions here. We're like 200 years old. And
they're literally like, what the fuck are you talking about? You don't, you know what I mean? And, like, they cannot compute. When we were in Bosnia, they did not grasp veganism. Like, veganism was an idea that just, that did not penetrate. And we had a vegan girl with us, and I was like, just tell them it's a religious thing. Just tell them you're part of a religious sect, and they will get it. Bosnia there's a ton of religions. They're always killing each other over shit. They get if you have a weird religion. She's like, I'm an atheist. I'm not going to lie to them about and I was like, then they're going to keep trying to feed you pork. Like that's their paradigm. They don't. But if you say, I have a religious objection to eating animals, they'll think you're crazy.
Sure.
But they won't serve you meat anymore.
Right.
That's the magician question, right?
Yeah, that actually brings me to a question that I have for you for a little later. I just want to table it right now. I want to get back to your story, but the question that I have here is like around communication. We're moving into a Mercury retrograde station. And so I was thinking about, like, ways to improve one's communication. I see Mercury retrograde as a moment of when you have to focus on the communication piece, when things are not working properly. And so you need to upskill and figure out how to improve what you're trying to do. And so I've been thinking about, like, little tech that we can do to get to a better kind of communication. And so what you're saying here is something about, like, speak to your listener.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to necessarily be wed to the factual truth if you can understand that like the paradigm that you're speaking into is this way, and if I want this kind of outcome, then I can speak into that paradigm in a way that will get me the outcomes that I'm looking for here.
100%. And actually, what I was trying to explain to this guy at the party was that, like, I actually think a lot of Christianity is great. I think it falls apart when it tells you it's the only way to think. If Christianity is one part of your bigger practice and that interfaces with other religions, other gods, frankly, other mystery traditions, then Christianity is actually kind of an interesting. It's kind of like Aikido, right? Like it's a shitty self-defense system on its own, but if you know how to fight, it's actually pretty enlightening, you know. I feel like Christianity does a lot of that kind of same work. But to that point about your communication thing, because my folks, he's like, oh, that must be really hard, and it's like, well, I can talk a lot about these concepts with my parents because I know how to speak their language, right? I can talk about, my mom and I got into a big talk about faith healing, and she thinks it's real and practice it, but has a very Christian lens on how it happens, right? I have done, if we count intentions, right? Like thousands of faith healings at this point, most of which have been successful on some level or another. Like, not to mention personal stuff, private stuff. Like I do a lot of healing, and or help to facilitate a lot of healing is probably a better way to say it. But but if I talk to her about, well, the thing is, like, I got tech, right? You know what I mean? That I could share with her. Be like, this works better when you do this replicably. But I got to talk to her about how that fits in her understanding of divine providence. If I want her to hear what I got to say, right? She's not going to come to me on that one. It's too that bridge is too far. But I don't mind doing that. I think over time they have actually opened up to quite a lot of stuff that if I had just been like, you got to talk to the devil, mom, like it never would have they never would have moved at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which can be frustrating. And that's the other piece I want to acknowledge before we talk about like dealing with not saying the exact thing, but to get the result you want, is that sometimes there's an emotional cost here. Like it can be hard to say, I am going to slow roll ideas to my parents for 5 years. And if I'm lucky, they're going to pick up 2 of them, but that will make things better. It'd be nice if they just agreed right on the spot that the thing that's important to me is important, but right. So there's a cost. There's a cost to Mercury retrograde.
Well, always there's a cost to Mercury retrograde, without a doubt. There's a cost to meeting people where they are and not where you are.
Yes.
Right.
I think it's generally worth paying, but there is a cost.
Yeah. Or the other way, like, I sort of brought my family into my style of witchcraft and faith healing in an emergency. Like, they were like, homie has pancreatic cancer and he's gonna die in 2 days. What are we gonna do? And I was like, listen, it's gonna be weird.
Right.
We can do some stuff, but it's gonna be weird. And they were like, give us the weird shit. Like anything, do whatever we can do. And then we did some weird shit, and my man's lived for the next 2 years after that. So, so
how do they frame that now? Like, so they encountered a miracle. You know what I mean? What is it? So what does that do? Or a magical?
Yeah, but my family is there's family bullshit all the time, and so there are rifts, and so I'm not really in contact with those folks anymore, and so it's hard to say. I as well am very interested in all of that, and it's hard. I just don't know.
Without dragging her too much into things, because my ex's business is her own, and part of that is she didn't really want to be dragged into this kind of stuff. So I try to respect that a little bit. But she still will either request or accept magical help from me on things, and that's again not her thing. I would describe her point of view as mystical scientist in the sense of like she's open for us not having explanations for things, but she's busy. You know what I mean? She's like, got a whole ass thing to worry about. I can't be worrying about angels while I'm, worrying about, astrocytes in the brain. Like it's my plate is full.
Sure.
But, and so it's always interesting where like, I think from the outside, people would assume that somebody like that would want absolutely nothing to do with requests, telling me like, hey, this person's sick. Can you do some magic shit? But she does. She calls me up, and her reasoning is like, the shit works. I don't understand why. I don't care why.
Don't tell me why.
Exactly. Don't talk to me about it. I don't want to hear anything about it, but I do want you to do whatever that weird thing is. Like, fucking do it. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually think it's a pretty reasonable way to approach stuff if you don't want to dive in of like, I don't totally need to understand. I have seen results. I'd like them to replicate,
Yeah. Yeah. I sort of that sounds to me a little bit like people who are aware that they can get good information from a card reading and would prefer not to.
Yeah.
I'm cool. That's I don't need you. It's gonna freak me out. I don't need it.
I find that response to be reasonably common, or more common than from my point of view. Because I'm like, wait, what? You can tell me shit from cards? Give me it. But
yeah, I'd run it at like, maybe 20% or something like that of people.
I think that's about right too.
Like 1 out of 5 will be like, we'll stand at the table and be like, wow, that was real crazy. It'll be like, you want a reading? And they'll be like, nah,
no,
don't bring it over here.
Yeah. It's interesting. So when you're talking about, okay, I like this idea of Mercury retrograde as a time to like assess communication and think about how, particularly in like the station, you know what I mean? Like try to figure this out. Where and particularly the idea of like, okay, normal speech is not going to work. My normal patterning is not going to work. What do I got to do to change
I don't necessarily know that that's true.
Okay, cool.
So, so the first thing that I notice is that people in general are very bad at communicating.
Yes, they are.
So you could make it your normal pattern to be very explicit and clear about what it is that you're saying, right? I see Mercury retrograde as a moment where there's a requirement for extra attention and focus on the Mercury things, the communication, transportation, translation, et cetera, right? And so, but I'm also someone, so people frequently compliment me on my communication. They say that what I say is very clear and that it's very understandable and these kinds of things, right? And part of the reason why that's true is because I'll say that it's very clear and I'll say that it's very understandable, right? I will use both of those words in case you didn't get one of them. Like, here's a couple of synonyms for you, your Mercury things, like for magicians at home, they know what the Mercury things are. But in case you didn't, in case this is your first time listening to me, then like your communication, your translation, your transportation, et cetera, these kinds of, right? Like I spend a lot of time doing that sort of stuff, right? And so perhaps this is me being like too cool for school. Maybe I'm just cooler than everyone else is, right? But like, I don't necessarily think that it's a moment where I am likely to change my approach because I already spend a lot of time being like, okay, so I'm going to be super clear and thorough about how I make sure that my communication happens, and so I'm going to continue to do that.
So there's two pieces there that I'm interested in. Three. Where's your Mercury? Is your Mercury retrograde in your chart?
No, it is direct in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. Yeah,
mine's retrograde in my chart in the 6th in Aquarius, next to the sun, doing his thing, hanging out. One of the things as a poet is that like you're always struggling with the incomprehensibility of ideas, right? The ineffable, the inexpressible. So there are two pieces to communication. One is, of course, what you just described, doing a good job being heard, right? You have removed the noise from the signal so that but there's always the other piece, back to Jesus again, if you have ears, let them hear, right?
You can't control what people are hearing.
Can't control what people are hearing. And I think something that can become frustrating, particularly if you are diligent in your speech and communication, is that suddenly people aren't hearing what the fuck you are saying.
Yeah, right. So in the age of digital communication where like right now me and you are talking back and forth, but there are listeners who can't talk back to us, so we don't know what they're hearing. Right?
They are screaming at whatever device they have. They're like, "You guys have missed something obvious.
Right.
I'm really upset about this. This is a normal pattern. I presume, as a listener of what we do, this is your normal feeling. Now is the time to begin screaming."
I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was talking about just passively listening to people talk, and I was like, "You're not like talking back and judging them the whole time?" Because like I'll be like, dude, this was not the word you meant to use. I'm offering notes the whole time, and
I have an opinion on Andrew Huberman. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't just listen to it. Like I have an opinion.
I absolutely exactly. That's why I have a podcast and he doesn't, maybe. But so we don't know what the listeners are hearing. And so one of the things that so Mercury is always two, right? It's two-faced and all the rest of this, right? One of my favorite jokes is that Mercury doesn't identify as either he or a she. Mercury identifies as a problem. So
fucking true.
Right, classic. But so there's both sides there that Mercury is going to be sort of engaged with all the time, and so there's the listening bit that is equally as important as the speaking bit, right? If communication is going to happen, then it's because speaking and listening both work. If somebody's deaf, then you can't speak to them because they didn't hear you, right? And so what you need to do is part of upskilling your listening is by what I do, at least all the time, is I repeat back what people said. And so I try to do that. I try to rephrase it. I try to say it in my own words whenever possible, unless it's, I work at a restaurant. And so if, people are just shouting stuff like 86 chicken, then I'll be like 86 chicken, just to be like, I heard you, rather than sometimes you'll say 86 chicken and people will be like heard, and they didn't actually hear you. They just said it and then kept on doing whatever, you know what I mean? So
I heard that you made noise and I
exactly
noise.
So I don't do that. I repeat the thing back, and so then that helps me to hear it. Then anybody in the vicinity also hears 86 chicken and all that, right? So that's communicative. But in an environment where I'm trying to hear what somebody is saying, trying to understand like emotional content or something like this, and I'll be like, I think I heard you say that you feel such and such a way. Is that what you said? And then they give them a chance to respond. Now, part of the problem with that is that it takes so much goddamn time to do that.
It does.
It takes a long time to listen to somebody in the first place. Like how many people are trying to listen to other people's feelings in the first place?
More should. You got to get out there. You got to do the work.
Do you have to? I don't think you do.
You do.
I think you can skate your whole damn life and not. But that's not what I'm doing. So. So it takes a while to let people like get through it, and then at the end of that, you gotta be like, okay, I think I heard you say this. And then you're going to get that wrong. And they're going to be like, hold up, And then they're going to go on a next tirade.
Yep.
And then you got to let them go through all that. And then you got to revise it. You got to do this again. You got to go back and forth a whole bunch of times, right? And so it takes a lot of time to get that done. But in doing that, you can come to a space where people really feel heard. People really feel seen and understood in that space. And that is golden to me.
I agree. And by the way, I do the exact same thing in business meetings of we'll go through the list and I'll say, okay, let me speak back what I heard here. This is, so you have my understanding. Am I missing anything? Do you have anything to add? Is this correct? And going back and forth. I do think one of the important things about communication is the willingness to let it become, again, mercurial, a river flowing back and forth between you two. Like that, like, because I think it's easy to be like, I write well, I'm a good communicator. No, the fuck you are not. You write well. It's not a good communication until somebody else is involved and it's going back and forth. Like it has to flow between the two, as you were describing. And I think there are ways to speed that process up, but they require very active listening and being very open to what people are saying. So, for instance, if I say something to you and you respond, and I notice that the way you're talking about it implies you may not have heard me fully, or you may not have gotten the entire thing, I can then respond to you again, either directly with something like, I'm hearing you say this, as you said, right? Which is a really great way to do it. Or if you are, for some reason, pressed for time and you really do need to have this communication, but you also have to get on a bus in 2 minutes, you can then you can listen for what is missing and put it into what you say back, right? As a test, right? You can be like, so what we're going to do is this. You add in the pieces that you heard absent from what the other person said. Like I'm saying, you have to be really listening for the spaces there. You can't check out at all in this kind of communication.
Yeah, and this actually makes me think of the interesting relationship between Mercury and the sun. So, because part of good communication is and making people feel understood is making them feel heard. But another way that people frequently describe that is they feel seen.
Yes.
Right? And it's the sun's job to see and be seen. The sun is the brightest object in the world, and it's therefore associated with visibility and eyes and this kind of thing. One of the things that I always say about the sun is that because it is associated with the eyes, if you look into someone's eyes, then you can see that there's a person in there, or you can see that they're crazy, or whatever it is that's going on with this person. You can make that kind of eye contact is a real kind of contact, right? And so it requires that attention, that kind of open attention to, if somebody's speaking to you, then you need to be there in that space. You need to be there with them and not waiting to say your thing, right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
you got to be willing to receive. And that's actually, sometimes, there's an ego bit there. Like you got to check your ego and put it on the shelf for a second, because we might not even get back to what you had hoped to say, and that's one of the things that we often on this show, we often run into that, where it's like, because we're like sort of being silly and we're like interrupting each other and shit like this, right? And then there'll be a good point that you are about to make, but I interrupted you, and then you were like listening to me and started to respond to what I said, and we didn't even get back to that other shit, which was gonna be dope, I promise, but we didn't get back to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit there that can make you, if you like are chomping at the bit to say your thing, then like, that can create friction because you're not actually listening because you want to be heard so much.
Right. I don't know if people know or not, like that, or we were to talk about it, that sometimes Zamboni and I come in with something we want to talk about in the same way that but it's not a topic for dissertation in the thing. It's the same way that you're like, hey man, I've been reading this book on economics. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Can we sit down and have some coffee and talk about these things? It's an open-ended, loose thing because we're trying to converse, right? And I think something that, I'm always happy to let the other point go in favor of where the conversation goes, because I think modeling, not only is modeling that good, but I think that we find if it's important, it'll come back in. Like the spirit will bring it back. It's fine. But but where the river takes us, where we flow together, is always more interesting to me. Than the 1 point I felt like I could have scored. 15 minutes,
Sure.
15 minutes earlier. But now to go back to something. No. Well, but I will say you bring up something there that I do find interesting too. So we're talking about a full attention,
Hmm.
a letting go of ego
Hmm.
to in favor of presence in order to really listen to somebody and be there.
Ooh.
Another
Hmm.
another mercurial piece I will add is memory, which
Mm.
is
Hmm.
actually remembering and taking in not only what people said, but how they said it
Hmm.
and the body language and the feeling that
Hmm.
was coming out. But like, because I
Hmm.
think we have a lot of communication, a lot of data thrown at us all the time. You can't remember everything. And I think we get into a habit of skating the top, right? And not remembering anything, kind of a doom
Mm.
scroll. I just saw 30
Mm.
things and I don't remember any of them. And I think that for good communication, you really need to be using the art of memory
Hmm.
to in to create better options, right? Which is what it's for.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes somebody says something, there'll be like a bit of a tirade,
Mhm.
where somebody will talk for 10 minutes or something like that. And there'll be something that was really important and resonant in the third minute.
Yeah,
And you just gotta like kind of hold that for a minute and be like, okay, we're just gonna
this
hold
was the
this.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. And I'm still here with you and I see you through all that. All right. Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. Now, earlier you said this thing,
Yeah.
and when you said that, then it felt like this. And so tell me more about that or something like this, right? Can like be
Yeah.
a way to sort of like dig deeper into the subject and again get people to feel seen and heard in a significant way.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. It's a and and when when I'm not doing good at that is when when I'm coasting out of the conversation, right? Like when I put part of my brain on autopilot for it.
Uh-huh.
Now, one thing that can be frustrating, I don't actually, let me ask you, I find this frustrating sometimes with people, and I tend to find conversationalists and people I like to talk to who I don't have this issue with. But whether you want to call it a little bit of psychicness, whether you want to call it just having tons of talks and consuming a lot of stuff so you kind of know how the patterns go, I can often tell exactly what is the lever point for this person in the
Mhm.
first 5 minutes of the conversation. And I know it's going to take 30 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
And I know what they really want. And I can even sometimes see the path they want to take to tell me the thing that we're going to get to. And then for me, and I know this sounds strange, but for me, it is an act of compassion to
Mhm.
let them have the whole conversation without just jumping in and being like, you want to know if she's cheating on you, she is. Like,
Sure.
and they're like, I had a whole thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Because if you short circuit it, then they'll be like, "Nah,"
Right.
and it won't work.
Or even if
The
you
w-
even if they admit it, they feel cheated of something
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
and it feels violent almost to do to people.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it is because what I'm saying is I don't care to hear your nonsense. I have other more
Sure.
important things to do. That's kind of a violent thing to say. Um, but it
So yeah.
is but it is an important act of care and compassion and love for another human being and treating them like a real human being to let them have their say, um,
Hmm.
even if you already know what it is.
Part of the way that I deal with that is by not treating it as frustration, but
Hmm.
instead keeping an open mind. Maybe I'm wrong. So I treat it like a game. Be like, I think that this is where we're going. I think that this is what's happening here.
Right.
So let's go ahead and I'm gonna let you talk
Let's
it
see.
through, and I'm gonna see if I hit the nail on the head. I think I did, but
Right.
let's see what happens. And I'll sometimes like formulate a sentence in my head and be like, I think this is it. And then they'll
Yeah.
say that sentence, and I'll be like,
Yeah.
ding ding ding,
Yes.
did it.
Oh shit, that was about your dead mom. Okay.
Right, right, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah. Particularly in cases where maybe maybe the full reach of human compassion is a hard one. You're talking to
Right.
the bank teller who's telling you about their day, and you're like, I really need my money. But
Sure.
you know, this is something
Well,
people,
okay. So in the case of a business transaction where we've gotten off topic, like how much responsibility do you have to this person's emotionality? You
Well,
know?
mankind should have been my business, Zamboni, to quote the great Dickens. Um, no, I actually think one of the secrets of my success, one of the reasons I do well in this sort of stuff, is I will talk to you about your dog.
Sure.
If we have a 30-minute meeting, I will talk to you about your dog for 20 minutes
Sure.
because the dog is more about the emotional connection that we need to do for you to feel safe doing the thing we both already agreed is good.
Sure.
And if you want to fuck your day, cut off a bank teller in the middle of their joke. That person
Okay.
can punish you
Yeah.
for hours.
Sure. Yeah, you make a good point. You make a good point.
And so I do think that I think all conversations should be about the emotional content of the conversation. And I think, if we look at some of the economic stuff that like Deidre McCloskey's talking about too, about like what is the marketplace? It's these relationships that we have between each other and the establishment of trust. Can't do that. What I find very frustrating there is when you run into corp speak. You're no longer talking to a human anymore. You're talking to a set of corporate policies, and there is no emotional content to the conversation. And so, how do you now? You're basically having a conversation with a demon. And you have to figure out how to work that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is a different kind of listening.
Yeah, I'm trash at that. I do real poorly in that environment. But there's something here that I am interested in when it comes to the Mercury retrograde thing, which is okay. So Mercury is retrograde, right? So delays are happening. I'm short on time. Like if I had been wise, people say that I'm very wise. They are wrong. If I had been wise, then I would have budgeted my time to include time for delays and all that bullshit. I did not. And here I am. I do actually have to get this bus in 2 minutes. So, how do we go about navigating this moment?
I will be honest. I do some pretty direct Mercury prayers and shit during Mercury retrograde. Like in those
Okay, sure. You go to spellcraft.
I do often go to spellcraft. I think but okay. Another thing though is the cultivation of behavior and habit as talisman. So if you are good at what we're talking about, let's say, all right, you're trying to get a ticket out of a man who the bus is leaving in 2 minutes. He wants to tell you about his uncle who caught a big fish. Like if you're from the South, this is not crazy. He wants to tell you about his uncle who caught the biggest fish that's ever happened in a lake nearby that you've never been to. You really need to get on the bus. There's two things there. One is the understanding the behavioral patterns that will speed him up and being good at just doing this kind of thing. In that case, it's a joke.
So participating in the story in such a way that he can get to his point.
Yes.
Because he knows that you're on board.
Exactly. You get to the trust faster. And so you're just good at establishing this kind of rapport because you do it all the time. And that creates this Mercury talisman of behavior that you get good results because you're constantly doing Mercury things. I think that's probably the most important one to do. And then the other one is like knowing how to jump the fence, right? Like knowing how to like get him to give it to you right then and get on the bus. Like which is well all right, actually I'll work with this one a bit, but think about a scenario that you think this a blocker you face where we can like workshop an idea. But like in this case, something is quick. So like the Mercury talisman way might be like, oh shit, man, yeah, my uncle what can you do with these guys? They always come back with some kind of crazy ass story. Thanks so much for helping me out today. Can I get that ticket? You know what I mean? Like that, you're participating in his story. He feels seen and heard, everything else. But you can also play on his sympathy, right? So in this case, you'd be like, my boss is going to kill me if I don't get on this bus, brother.
I see.
Right.
Sure.
And he, as someone who's
so you interrupted. He's like in the middle. He's like, "Boy, I'm telling you, over there, Lake Shamaduzin, man, my uncle the other day, he just had it, and you just jump in there.
I'm like, I appreciate you so much. Wish I had time to talk, but my bosses are going to be up my ass if I can't get on this bus right now. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
I'm still making him a hero in this story.
Yeah.
He's helping me out. He's going to feel good about it.
Right. This is actually part of where I was trying to get to is I'm trying to get back to the gift economy a little bit, right? So what I was thinking about was not a stranger situation, but rather a situation where you're talking with an associate, somebody you know, a friend, a colleague, a partner, something like this, and they're trying to go in and do the whole thing, or you've got a date that you have to break or something like this, or like you know what I mean? And so be like, look, I can't do it this time. I have other priorities that I just have to, my boss is going to be up my ass or whatever it is, I got to do my thing. So one thing that I have found is very useful is to immediately suggest an alternative. So like, I know I said we was going to meet tonight. Can we please meet on Tuesday? I got time on Tuesday. I'm gonna be able to finish my whole thing up by that moment. Can we please do that? And here is a little gift to thank you so much for your understanding in this moment. I super appreciate you. And can we do this instead? You know what I mean? So that way I press pause. I'm not trying to cut you off. I just don't have the capacity for it in this moment. I want to hear your story. Please tell me about this fish. I just need you to tell me about this fish on Tuesday.
Right.
And and here's a little treat for being such a cutie.
So when I was a kid, you get told stories about how bribery is bad. Right? Like people talk about cops taking bribes, the things. This is bad.
Oh, sure.
Bad. Such bad. My grandfather was a backyard mechanic, and he bribed a guy all the time to get his cars past the state inspection.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
His cars never had a problem because he bribed him all the time. There was never, like, he bribed him when he didn't even need to bribe him for things. Always bribing him. So you can do what you're talking about with the gift now, but it will be even more effective if you are always giving gifts. If I give you a gift every time we talk, you feel like, man, I feel so blessed by that conversation. I feel that person gave me a lot. That when it comes time to be like, I need to rely on your grace, that person is like, well, there's a whole bank of grace because you've been filling it up the whole time, and I'm happy to extend you a little grace. I'm happy to be the one giving in this economy. It makes me feel powerful and good to offer this. And the thing you can't do, you can't be burning favors all the time. Right. So like if you do reschedule, you better fucking make that reschedule or you're going to be in debt. And you get too many of those and then shit just burns. It's just, there's nothing left. But one of the gifts I think you can, so first off, like, I think every conversation you have with someone, you should be giving them gifts. Because that's what you should do. It's nice. Point out something nice they said. Say thank you. Appreciate their story. Do all this kind of stuff. And then if you ever do have to rely on it, it will be helpful. But that's not why you do it. It's also true. But then the other piece is that the gift you can give someone sometimes is the ability to give you a gift. Letting them let you off the hook gives them power, makes them feel magnanimous, makes them feel like the bigger person, and like they have the authority to give you things. So they, that can be the whole gift you give them. If I think it works best if you have a long-standing back and forth.
Sure.
But yeah, that can be enough.
Yeah. But it was working in your bus teller
It would work
fish
there,
scenario as well, right?
Yeah.
Like you make him feel big because he's gonna help you out. Like I need this favor. Please, can you give me a favor because you are in a position of power that can give me. You are so powerful and magnanimous. Can you please bestow a bit of grace onto me, good sir?
And people love to do it. Angels love to do it. Everybody fucking loves to do it.
Sure.
Because one of the pieces Rob and Kimmer was making out is that the gift economy is what nature does. That is the way of the world, is the gift. We've come up with other shit, but the gift economy is actually how the world functions. And for most of human history, it was the way things functioned. And so I think that like our own egos, our own desire to hoard power, these things get in the way of letting people give us gifts. Because if you take a gift, you take an obligation.
Right. Yeah. There's that too. Right. Yeah. And you and I live downstream from a Puritan culture that doesn't think itself worthy of anything. And so I run into this problem all the time because I work in a restaurant. So, like tips are a big deal. Right.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while, a big tipping customer will come in and will like want to like, just like making it rain on us. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there'll be people around who are like, no, you don't have to do this. You don't have, please don't. And like they'll try to like dodge the rain of money coming down on them. You know what I mean? They'll like get their little umbrella out. You know what I mean? And then just sit sadly in the no money that happens after that. You know what I mean?
Softly dry in here.
Right. And that's one of the things that I be telling people all the time is like, no, what you do is you say thank you.
Yeah.
You make it be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so happy that you came in here to do this, to bless me like this. What a blessing this has been to me. Thank you so much for doing this for me. You know what I mean? Because then I get to say thank you. And we've already mentioned how gratitude is the best magic you can possibly do. So let's get a little of that going on in my own heart. My pockets get lined. Then the big tipper gets to be like, hell yeah, I'm a blessing out here in this bitch. Yes. You know what I mean? Like it's a win-win in that situation.
Totally. It's funny. Working restaurants, I was in the like turn that umbrella upside down, let's fill it up with money, attitude. When I worked at the liquor store, we weren't supposed to take tips for like helping people out to their car. And I had a real personal variable policy on this. If an older woman in particular wanted to give me a tip after I took stuff to her car, my answer was no. She felt obligated. Do you know what I mean? Like she felt that and I wanted to give her the extra gift of, ma'am, I see you. You deserve the status of young man helps you to the car. Do you know what I mean? Like you deserve that status. Meanwhile, same age guy is like, let me give you $5. Be like, great.
Appreciate you.
Take it. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, boss. And it's again, listening for what the gift is and where it can be given and what is best there. The restaurant service stuff makes it simple. I have this thing. I think people misunderstand the function of strip clubs entirely. Because I think the function of a strip club, or the fantasy of a strip club, is that you are king for a couple hours. Like, I don't understand why you would ever go into a strip club, buy a beer, throw $2 at the dancer, and leave. That doesn't make any sense to me. If I'm going to the strip club, I want to lose $300. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to feel like I live for however long that is. I'm an easy mark, so not that long. Uh, I want to feel like money is not a problem.
Hmm.
I give gifts. Everyone appreciates it. I'm a fucking king and I do what I do.
Sure.
It's, and I think that fantasy is much wider spread. And I think the puritanical stands entirely opposed to that whole idea. It hates
Hmm.
everything about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Puritans don't like kings for sure.
They don't like kings. They don't like strip clubs. They don't like they don't like money going places. They don't like blowing $300 in an hour. Do you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
They don't
sure.
like any of that shit. And consequently, they live joyless, horrible lives.
Yeah, of toil.
Yeah. Fucking misery and bad buckle hats. Like, what the fuck is this nonsense?
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. You have come back to the king fantasy lots of times. So
Oh yeah,
I don't know if this is as widespread as
could just be
you were
me.
claiming.
Yeah, could be me.
I don't know that it's not, but I
Yeah, yeah,
definitely know that you have talked about this a lot.
yeah.
You the patron
Yep. Pater
patron.
Familias,
That's the
the
one.
patron. Yeah, all
Uh,
that stuff. Very important to me and how I think of magic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The prince also shows up
Hmm. Hmm.
a lot in the imagery, and so like
Yep.
this idea of royalty and like I'm the fucking man. So like
Yep.
part of what I do is show up and blessings for all the hoes,
It's
right?
true. That's what I do.
Like
It's problematic for an anarchist sometimes, except not really. It doesn't have anything to do with authority or unearned authority, I should say. So
there it
like,
is.
yeah, you're
Uh-huh.
the king if you're the king.
Right, exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're
Like
not the
the
king, then you're not the king. Yeah.
right. Totally. Totally. And you can be the king.
Yeah.
It's up to you, Playboy.
Up to you. If you want
Hmm.
to be king. Yeah. You just got to take what comes with being king.
Right. There's a lot of responsibility that,
Yeah.
with great power comes
There's
great responsibility.
there's a lot there's a lot of beautiful women to throw money at. Do you know what I mean?
Right. It's
It's a
true.
hard
It's
life.
true.
It's a tough
Uh,
thing.
there's a lot of hours, and if we're doing $300 an hour, we
Yeah. Listen, I don't go near strip clubs a lot of times for a good reason. 'Cause I know what's gonna
right.
happen.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, but that's another debt to old Uncle Alistair there of he had a line of if he be a king, no harm may come to him. Um,
Hmm.
and basically constantly running that razor's edge of like, yeah, yeah, you're king until you're not.
Mm.
And when that
Hmm.
harm befalls you, well, then you're not king anymore, buddy. Like that's the end of the line.
Sure. Hmm.
So it's a little bit like you're not going to throw up from being seasick if you keep this rock in your mouth, but it is also like it's a good it's a
Okay.
good but it is a good thing to aspire to of like if I can maintain this is that and I think similarly there is a little bit of like emperor's new clothes kind of approach to good communication too. I think people sometimes get caught up in like am I communicating well? Is this coming across well? How do I do this? Like trying to like sort of Virgo your way through a problem. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of times, good communication does come down to some basic skills we've been talking about, but then also just fully believing you are communicating well. Just
Mm.
I think there's a certain amount of bluff that comes along with this.
Yeah. I mean, I see how you arrived there,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I don't. Yeah, take another drink. I don't know about this.
All
I
right,
don't
let's get spicy.
like.
I'm gonna get real spicy on you.
All
Is
right.
Donald Trump a good communicator?
Okay. Yeah, you immediately knew where I was going with this.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Like, look, I mean,
It's it's
motherfuckers
it's
believe him.
it's thorny. It's not. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
it's thorny.
Yeah, but like, I don't know, man. Like, if you don't have anything to say, can you communicate well? Like a lot of times I feel like he'd just talk. just be like, he's the man, and so like I guess he's talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated. I don't know. Lots of stuff with him. You're like, somebody said this around you, and you latched onto it as a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like that's clearly
Sure.
he just kind of like magpies together some words and watches them run. But he started talking at the end of the campaign about the weave. Did you hear him talking about the weave?
I do not listen to Donald Trump speak. I don't know what you think I'm doing with my life right now, but
I do, because first off, it's a horrific train wreck of words. Like it's bad news. Do you know what I mean? Like it's really bad. But I'm fascinated by what is that?
You're proving my point right now.
Well, but I'm fascinated by how does that result in what he gets, right?
Sure.
So he started getting a lot of accusations, I think quite rightly, that he just rambles out bullshit and there's nothing going on. And he began saying that that's not what he does. What he does, he says, is a technique called the weave, where you mention a little something here, you mention a little something there, and it all seems very scattershot, and then you weave it all together at the end.
Okay.
Now, this is a real thing.
Sure.
A really cool way to talk. I don't think he does it, but somebody said this thing near him, and he was like, I could pretend that's what I do.
Yeah, I've been doing that a lot.
Yeah, and good speakers do it. Good speakers will either find the thread in the conversation and pull it tight, or will build one.
I love coming back to a thread that I left 15 minutes ago and come back around and be like, ha! You thought I forgot.
Exactly. I was actually building us back here. Yeah, it's so good.
Right.
The thing I'm left with is, what was he communicating?
That's what I'm saying.
No. What was his goal? Because I think he might have been heard very clearly for what he wanted to communicate. What he wanted to communicate.
This is a little bit like speaking to the paradigm that you're speaking into, right?
Yes. In some ways, he may be one of the weirdly best at that's ever happened. It's almost like a negative version of it, where he creates a black hole where you throw in all your... Because I would listen to him speak. He would say some crazy shit about how Hannibal Lecter was a nice man and immigrants should be kicked out of the country. That's literal. It was so bad, I thought it was a Democratic AI smear campaign, and I went to check like conservative tapes, basically, and they were like, nope, he said Hannibal Lecter is a good man.
Okay.
We all remember the good doctor Hannibal Lecter is what he said. And I was like, no, we don't. That's a fiction. What's happening here? And he said some crazy shit about immigrants afterwards. I heard people say 13 different versions of what he actually said. And each one reflected their own desire for what he's... And with Trump, you hear this all the time. Oh, what he really means is this. Oh, yeah, he said that, but what he meant was this. And you're like, he somehow creates a negative space in which people throw their own desires in. Kind of like one of the most communicative things why cartoons work is like a simple smiley face works because we can project a lot onto it.
Sure.
And Trump is in some ways that smiley face. That's happening around him. And in this maelstrom, what he wants is to get what he wants. He is communicating to you that if he gets what he wants, you'll get what you want. So whatever you put in, he's going to get it for you.
Sure. Right.
Now, I would say this is absolute sophistry. This is bad magic. I mean, this is dark magic, whatever how you want to call, like, left-hand path kind of shit. But is he communicating well? He is getting you to agree with what he wants and talking to your emotional need.
Sure. Yeah.
Is it true?
I don't like the second person pronoun in this moment, but
it was definitely a universal you. It wasn't meant to be Zamboni.
I got you.
Zamboni.
I don't even think the listener, the casual listener this podcast is like is spoken to by that. But sure, I see what you mean.
Americans.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
My
or
fellow
like 52% or something like this, right?
Yeah.
52% of voters or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying about like getting what you want and not being wed to factual accuracy in order to get there, like tell them it's a religious belief and they'll stop serving you pork. Okay, sure. Or tell them, say whatever you need to say so that they'll project their own values and insecurities and whatever else into the situation and make it feel like you're gonna solve the problem for them, and then you get what you want, which is to become king. Ultimately, this guy, right? And so, sure, okay. One of the, all right, so I fancy myself pretty different from Donald Trump. I have Mercury in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. And so one of the things that I care very deeply about is saying only the things that I mean. Like I'm extremely honest. And I am to a point of brutality and sharpness, but I try to not be blunt or like sharp with it. But even if I'm not being sharp, I try to only say the things that I mean and not say the things that I don't mean. Right?
Sure.
To me, this is good magic. Like don't ask for things that you don't want. Right? Which is extremely difficult to do. But it's, to me, important to maintain consistency and coherence. And to me, coherence and consistency are paramount. These are not present in the president-elect.
Yes. And so to be clear here too, I also think this is immoral and bad in a lot of ways. And I think it comes with good communication. Comes with a cost, though. I think that dude is slowly losing his mind.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean,
maybe not so slowly.
Yeah, not so slowly. And like, like that's the position.
Well, but I wonder how much of it is in sacrificing so much of what you think or want or whatever to become the black hole of things. And so the difference because I also, like you, I actually have a pretty high prize on honesty, which people be like, you're willing to tell people it's, tell them this so it's not pork. I actually really hate lying to people, and fidelity and truthfulness really important to me. Where I differ is a translation.
Oh, okay. Tell me more.
So like, if I'm trying to tell you something and I've told it to you flat, and you're not hearing me, and I can't make you hear me, I'm not speaking your language. And I'm willing to translate what I believe to be true into your language so you can hear me, so we can work together. But that's different than out and out being like, I'll just tell you whatever you want to hear. Right? Like those are different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I wonder, is this related then to what I think of as there's a kind of mystical concept that the cards will say what you need to hear. So like so you can get a card reading that like the cards will intentionally throw you a thing that they know you're going to read in this kind of way, and then you go on to behave in response to that reading of it, and then things play out, and you see that the cards were pretty accurate, but they threw you off course, and is this a related concept, do you think? Like, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear.
That's an interesting. I think it is slightly different, but I do think it's related. So the thing I think that would be the same, exactly the same, is if you're like, I don't know, am I going to get a raise? this year in the cards.
I hate a yes no.
I fucking love the yes nos. I love them so
Yeah,
much.
you do? You
Yeah,
read yes nos?
all the time. I mean, that's all geomancy is or we try to get them into
Oh, as a
yes nos.
geomancer. Oh, sure.
Yeah, but
Okay.
even on the cards, I try to get them to yes nos.
You actively try, you workshop
Yeah,
questions into yes nos?
yeah, yeah,
What?
yeah.
I
It's good
don't know
for
what to
them.
do with a yes no. I
It's
hate a
good
yes
for
no
them.
question. How do you
But
read
let's
yes nos?
two
Do you do
ways.
the red black thing?
I do the red black thing, and then I also do just what the cards, what the story of the cards tell me for a yes no. Like if you're
Yeah, but
like,
a story is not yes no.
so I had a reading recently where a person was like, how is is my relationship going to end?
Uh huh.
And I was like, okay, let's read it. And it was like all swords. I was like, well, I'm gonna say yes. It's gonna
Sure,
end.
sure.
You know what I
Okay, okay.
mean?
Uh huh.
It's like it's not looking great. you know?
Sure, sure.
Um,
Yeah, right. Like if it was me, I would workshop that question into like, what's next in this relationship or something like that. Then get all the swords and be like, it's not looking good.
it's not
Like
looking good. Yeah. I think so. I think the thing that's most similar is let's take the tower, for example. Client comes to you and is like, I have what is work going to look like in the next couple months? And you get the tower.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, some people, if you're like, it's fucked. it's,
Sure.
some people, everyone needs to hear it's fucked. Everyone also probably needs to hear, depending on which card you're reading, but in the Marseille deck I read, there's little, people are coming out of the tower. And sometimes you can read that as those people are falling out of the tower, and sometimes you can get it as those people are escaping the tower, right?
Hmm.
Both of those are true in the card. They're in the matrix of meaning that's there.
Hmm.
And if I'm looking across at somebody who's so depressed, they're not going to see the rest of the card reading that says like, "Hey, there's a way out of this." Like you need to get a new job tomorrow. You emphasize the piece that says people get out of the tower.
Hmm.
If you got somebody who's completely not paying attention to you, not taking you seriously,
Hmm.
you might emphasize the part that's like, people get fucked up by this tower blowing up. You know what I mean? Like, pay attention.
Hmm.
So, I am trying to translate the meaning of this into something they will hear, but I am not fundamentally trying to alter the meaning. That's the one-to-one from what we were talking about before.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Then the question of like, do I think the cards tell us things to put us on a path? I think sometimes yes. I think it depends how much your spirits like to fuck with you.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, to be completely
A
honest,
lot.
my ancestors will show up in dreams for Jess and say, tell him this because he'll listen to you. He isn't listening to us.
Sure. Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? And they're right.
Yeah, I
I'm
do
way more
fucking
likely
know
to
what you
listen to
mean.
her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just broke up with my situationship over that shit right there. Some cards got me into a situation where I was like, I don't know, this should look, I've never seen such nice cards before. Maybe I should get into this situation. And then like it didn't go good, but she benefited a lot from that.
Yeah.
She listened to
Well,
me a lot during that time.
she did. And also, not to tell your own business too much, but you also redefined some things about what you were looking for in people that like was helpful.
Sure. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
right. Yeah, sure. I got some value out of it, but not with those cards.
Not exactly. It wasn't what the cards were saying. That's for sure. But do you think you would have spent the time if the cards had been
Absolutely not.
completely
No.
accurate? Yeah.
No, because I was already I was already in a spot where I was like, this doesn't look good. This looks like the whole shit looked rickety. I'm not really fucking with this. And then she like sent me a funny meme and I was like, okay, like, do I respond to this meme? And so then I like read some cards about it and I was like, man, this is cute as fuck. Okay. I could go for some cute. Okay, let's do it. And then so that put me on the path of like back where now we're in the thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at a point in my understanding now where I think that was like her people like trying to get me involved.
Right. I don't know how I feel about that sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like personally, as a magician, I don't know. I don't always like it when I get moved around the board, you know?
Oh yeah, I I
But
don't know how I feel about it. Let me tell you
yeah,
that.
but
Do I know anybody who's going
sometimes
through a
it's,
fucking Pluto transit? Sorry. What were you saying?
I was just saying that sometimes I'm like, all right, it's kind of the game. You know what I mean? Like I signed on to fuck with spirits and figure this shit out. So
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes it's the price of entry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. The price of entry. So like I've also had readings where got a 36-year-old woman and she's like just recently broken up and she's like, am I ever gonna have a baby? And then
Yeah,
the cards like come out terrible. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And it's like these cards are trolling you.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes maybe it's actually accurate. Maybe it's actually as terrible as all that, but like, probably not. You're like these cards are like being real, very very affronting right now, and like they think it's funny. I
Yeah.
see why they think it's funny. I see that you don't think it's funny. Like you know,
This is actually a really good point because again, we're talking about what does it mean to do fortune telling through a communicative process? And like, so like if one of the ways I structure readings is I like to get a good question in for a geomancy thing. Then I like to read the chart. And then I want to hear from the person what connected for them and whether they
mm,
want like more details back and forth. So if I'm like, you got Puer in the 10th, it looks like some real like kind of like aggressive bro fighty kind of approach is going to be very successful at work. How does that resonate for you? I want to hear what they have to say about that. And then we sort of look at
mhm,
it again and go back and forth. And somewhere in that process, often it'll feel like the spirits are just talking, like the figure's just talking for me, right?
mm,
Like but now we're getting into the back and forth. And I think if you lay out those cards for that woman in question and she's like, fuck that, I don't believe these fucking cards. I'm going to go get knocked up right now. Do you know what I mean? That is actually still a very interesting part of the reading. There's her response back
mhm, mhm.
tells you,
That's what I'm saying about like maybe they say what you need to hear.
yeah, to get you
You know what I
fired
mean?
up, to get you mad. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes I think we have to allow for that if we're talking about living spirits that are in this conversation,
That's what I'm
you
saying.
know?
I
Yeah.
like so so this gets into that piece about like saying exactly what you mean or like being honest or like like allow allowing for a certain kind of reflection to take place.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, do you want to see you? What do you think about that? You know?
I saw a good joke the other day where a woman's asking her partner, she's done her hair up in like little pigtails. And so she asked her partner, she's like, hey, how do you think my hair looks?
Hmm.
And he's like, do you want the real answer? Or do you want the husband answer? She's like, I want the husband answer. He's like, your hair looks great. You've done a beautiful job. You spent all this time on it. I think you're going to take it out. And I think people are going to be real happy to see it. I think you did a good job, sweetheart.
Hmm.
She sits there for a second. She's like, mm, and now I want the real answer.
Hmm.
And he's like, those make me want to grab you by the braids and fuck the shit out of you for the rest of the day. That's what the real answer is. And he walks out of the car.
Sure. Uh-huh.
And there's the piece here is that like, what did she need to hear when and what order in order to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
the real laugh? Like to feel really validated.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
if he had just told her the first thing, out the gate, it doesn't have the same meaning anymore. So
Yeah, so what was he gonna do if she asked for the real answer first?
I
That's what I want to know. Like, where?
I think he would have reversed it.
Yeah, he would have sure. Just
Right.
give it in that order, no matter what
It's
happens.
always that order. It doesn't matter. At least that's what I would have
Okay.
done.
Yeah, that's the wizard move, right?
Right. And so communicating as wise, right? If the straight answer is going to cause harm and not get you what you want and not be heard well, why the fuck are you doing that? Is that even honesty? Did you have friends who went through the period where they were like, I do radical honesty now? Did you have
Sure.
this shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. It's what's that Jim Carrey movie? Liar Liar.
Yeah. Yeah. So living with that shit every day.
Yeah.
Would you like some food? I think your cooking's terrible. That's not helpful.
Right. Yeah, we're not fostering community. And like so community and communication are damn near the same word, right?
Totally. Totally. And the idea that any of our speech happens in a vacuum or happens without really trying to generate something in this shared sense is asshole behavior, frankly.
Sure.
So we get to issues of truth and stuff like, yes, I do care about the truth, and I do want people to get to the truth, and I want to share what I believe to be the truth, but I need to be open to what other people think is the truth that disagrees with me. And then I also need to think about how are they in a position to hear any of the fucking things I'm saying to them?
Okay. Yeah. Also, like, it's kind of not for me to decide what other people can and can't hear. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. How much do I need to infantilize another person?
As much as possible. As much as you deal with babies, you just pick them up, throw them around. Not a big deal.
Sure.
No, I don't think it's a question of
Best babies are shaken, not stirred.
No, I'm not. I will not go down this path. I'm not go down that path. But that was quality. I don't think it's infantilization to notice that what you're saying is not landing. You know what I mean?
Well, right. Sure. Notice that it's not landing is one thing, but like editing before I say the thing is, like that's an important piece where, like, cause if you're doing a reading, it comes up all the time in a reading where you're like reading something hard and you're like, okay, how am I going to say this so that it can land, this kind of thing. But like, if it's your friend who, is offering you a dish that you are hungry, but you have eaten this food before, and it's like in Rapper's Delight, the second verse in Rapper's Delight, where he jumps out the window, he's like, I can't do this, I gotta get out of here. You know what I mean? Like you might be in that situation, right? And then so you got to think about that. You got to like before I say anything at all, then like what am I going to do about this? You know what I mean? And there's something here about also like how do we appropriately communicate boundaries? How do we appropriately say no, negate, and deny what's going on, especially around people who we love or respect or care for or want to continue to get money from or something?
I think part of it is, again, going back to trust and making trust. So being open-ended in how you talk about things, leaving room for people to come back in. I think that is actually important. So classic example in my house was when 2 Christmases ago, I decided to ruin Christmas for everybody. Several of my siblings and little nibblings are not classically Protestant Christian in their way of being things, and my mother, in all her sweetness, would really love to give these kids cupcakes first thing Christmas morning and make them sing "Happy Birthday to Jesus." This is several parents have some issues around this being indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
Other parents have an issue being like, why are you giving them a cupcake before we give them some decent food? They're going to be crazy. It's Christmas.
Right. This
All
is
this
hard
stuff
on
going on.
everybody.
It's hard on everybody. She did not want to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Can't tell grandma shit.
Can't tell grandma shit. And so it took quite a long time of being willing to say, like, getting her to say too, like, what is important about this to you? What matters to you about this? And but if I had just come and like, if it's Krampus or nothing, Grandma, we're not like, if there aren't devil horns on this cake, I'm not eating shit the whole time I'm here. It's not respectful to her. Do you know what I mean? It's not respectful to anybody in that conversation. But at the same time,
respect. That's a good keyword when we're talking about boundaries, I think.
Yeah, because it goes both ways. Because the thing there too is like, it's also not respectful for me to give in on this thing that and so in that case, I was like, look, Christmas tree, Christmas carols, sitting around the Christmas stocking, all of this is great. You want to sing hymns around the tree, perfect. That's different than the cupcake thing, right? Like it's a different flavor. And that's where my line is, and respectfully, I that is my line. But I see you. I want you to have a Christmas that you recognize. I don't want to take. I respect what you're bringing here. You have a right to enjoy this too. You're a person, So that, to me, that's the boundary kind of thing of like, you. Sometimes you do have to set a very hard and harsh boundary, and that's just the way it has to be for your own self-protection. But a lot of times, I think we can set firm but gentle boundaries that see the need in the other person, and try to make them feel, as you said earlier, feel seen. Respect is literally to look upon, right? To spectate.
Oh yeah,
yeah. To look back,
there's that
to see each other,
there, right?
Yeah, to see each other. And so, if you don't make someone feel seen, the boundary is not going to be accepted without a fight.
Sure. That's really interesting. When I think about boundaries, then, Saturn obviously shows up, right? And respect is another Saturn kind of situation so we, like these are keywords associated with Saturn that come up all the time. But one of the things that I notice here about generating good, appropriate, effective boundaries that are gentle and also firm, that are that do the job of keeping some stuff on the other side of the line while also maintaining a sense of community and inclusion, is the other Saturn thing of taking a long time, right?
Yeah.
Going super slow with it and being like, okay, all right, I need you to tell me what really matters to you in this. Like, why does this matter to you? And I'm going to listen through that whole shit, even though I'm sitting over here being like, this is some bullshit. I'm going to listen to this bullshit.
Yes.
and we're going to do this whole process. What I think you said was, you're going to do all that in order to come to this place of like, this other person feels seen and heard and therefore included, even though you still got to stay on the other side of this line.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good description of it. And it's, the lessons I've had I wish there was a better term. There probably is, I'm just not aware of, nonviolent communication were very useful and continue to be very useful to me. I statements, listening, waiting, repeating back what's heard, all this kind of stuff. It's really, really effective. The reason I object to the term is that I think we can get past just a bare minimum of nonviolence right into something community building, although I see the purpose in it. But I think unfortunately we're just telling people that part of a retrograde in a station is slowing down. You got to leave time for shit. Things are going to take more time. And it may be a virtue, right? You can make a virtue of the extra time. You can actually get deep and find cool shit by saying, oh, it's a time to go deep. It's a time to slow down. Okay, great. I'm gonna,
Yeah, it's a time to take the time that it takes to
Yes.
do all of the communicative, inclusive, boundary setting, all the rest of it. If you need to do the thing, then it's going to take you some time to do that, and there's a good time to make sure that you end up doing that thing.
Back to corp speak for just a second. Corporate time is also a horrifying thing. Like, it gets us out of these normal rhythms where we do this, where we actually. One of the things that was really funny about when people started going to Zoom meetings a lot is they began scheduling meetings back to back with no breaks. Never would happen in person because everybody knows that an in-person meeting, the last 5 minutes or some chit chat, and then you're going to go, use the bathroom, do whatever, come to the next meeting. So you don't schedule them back to back. You put at least 15 minutes between them because people they got to move around and it's not going to happen. But the moment we were all on computers, corporations were like, whoa, yeah, this meeting's done, next meeting starts. Right?
Yeah, one of the things that I've really spent a lot of time with recently is, or I don't know, forever, I guess, is thinking of a definition of time. And time is the relationship between objects in space. A measure of the relationship between objects and space, and so the relationality matters a lot, right? The sense of daytime is when the sun is up relative to where you are on the horizon. That is a relationship. It's a spatial relationship, and it's a relationship between two bodies, right? And that relationality speaks to the context of everything. Everything that we live in is in a certain context. And so, and that context spatially is weird in Zoom space, right? On the internet and all the rest of it, that we've become more and more privatized, atomized units in the digital space, in the digital era. And so there's a kind of confusion around what even would be appropriate,
Right.
like whatever bosses are scheduling these meetings, just like probably didn't even think about it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. They're in different time. Yeah. It's interesting. Something for another conversation. I've been thinking about the difference between how objects move and how objects age. And like a stone knife is going to be the same for a very long time, but an arrow is going to experience a lot of motion very, very differently and time very differently. So this is interesting. You were talking about that. I've been ruminating on something similar for a little while here. So
yeah, that's super interesting stuff. I'll be excited to get to it next time. In the meantime, if I were to get a geomancy reading, where would I go?
Well, you can just come to wilkinsbryan.com, hit me up with our fancy sign-up system, and hear what the 16 figures of geomancy have to add to your life. Speaking of sassy, they're fucking sassy, man. They're just come in. There's no like, oh, these cards are being sassy today. No, it's gonna be Uncle Geo likes to. Speaking of someone who likes to tell it like it is, Uncle Geo likes to tell it like it is. But that can be a lot of fun.
They be telling you some wild stories all the time.
They do tell us some wild stories. But and
could I get a card reading if I wanted to?
You can get a card reading. I'll do some tarot for you, but I mostly do oracle deck readings off of the Oracle of the Deckhands, the deck I developed to go with the book. And
is that book available that you wrote?
It is available at Revelor Press and pretty much anywhere else you want to pick it up. You can still get a copy of that book. So,
and to that I say, hail to the motherfucking yeah!
I'm excited about it, and hopefully in the new year we'll be talking about some other options, some new books. I'm working. I'm trying to get stuff done. So
you sound like Austin Coppock over here. You should shut up until it's done.
Listen, if you're
Austin Coppock been talking about the second edition of Faces since 2019.
If you guys are looking for a book about the deckhands that is currently out and is not 36 Faces, well, I have one for you. And thank you all for taking forever to put yours out.
There it is. Will Small Gods, available wherever Revelor Press is.
Exactly. And if I were looking to better understand time, the passage of time, the understanding of the placements of planets in time and stuff, would I be able to find some of that out someplace, Zamboni? Is there a class I could take or readings I could get that might elucidate and illuminate these topics for me?
Indeed, there is. There's a class called Astrology from the Ground Up. Currently, it is not available through my website anymore, so you would have to DM me about that. But if you wanted to get a reading, then you could go to ZamboniFunk.com. If you wanted to listen to me talk about that kind of thing, or if you wanted to listen to me do some art in real time, I do music and this kind of thing. All of that is going to be available at ZamboniFunk.com. Also Spotify, Tidal, Pandora, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever you like to get your music at. It's in those places. It's Astrology from the Ground Up has been fun. It's been, I've been really well pleased with, this is the second iteration of this course, and it has been going very well. The questions have been really good. The workbook component, I think, is, like, I sort of have been talking shit on the first group of students for being such nerds that they asked for homework in the first place. But now that I've been seeing some students go through and do the workbook that I have prepared, it seems to be really effective. It seems to be really good for helping people to understand basic astrological concepts and sort of apply it to their own lives and their own charts and their own understanding. Like, part of the exercise is to go out and look into the sky. Like, what do you notice in the sky? What shape is the moon? Why would the moon be shaped this way? Well, because the moon has, like, only light on the one side of it because the sun is over there. You know, like, there's a literal physical reason why the moon would be shaped in the way that it is. And right. So there's like these kinds of things. It's easy for people to forget that astrology doesn't take place on astro.com or wherever you're getting your chart from, right? But that it's actually happening in the sky. And so there's a bunch of that sort of stuff, as well as the sort of like technical delineations as well. And so I felt really good about it. I'm super excited about how that has been going. There are still 3 weeks left or something like that. So you could DM me and get involved with that while it's live. So you can still ask questions and all this. And then pretty soon after that's done, then it'll be packaged up and available online through the website, ZamboniFunk.com.
Very exciting. So, I will also add one little piece is, since I'm going to guess this is going to come out somewhere close to Black Friday, somewhere close to the heart of capitalism in the United States. That one thing Zamboni just talk about all the time is you can get some good gym drip from ZamboniFunk.com. You can get some hoodies. It's like that little light hoodie makes for a perfect little like pump cover. Like, seriously, guys, like, it's good to wear up to the gym. It's good to walk around in. You will get compliments from very attractive and interesting people. I guarantee you. Zamboni doesn't guarantee you this, but I do. I guarantee it. I would just say, like, listen, if you're looking for a little bit of like practical merch you can wear around and give as gifts to people, do whatever you want, like, it's a good look. It's a good look. So
this is true. Swagalicious up in here. So
it's true.
I appreciate that plug. Good looking out. Thank y'all so much for listening to us ramble. This has been delightful and a long time coming. I have missed putting these together. So thank you, Brian, for being here. Thank you to the audience for showing up and showing out with us. Appreciate all y'all. And I look forward to seeing y'all next time. Peace and blessings, family.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.